Sometimes God speaks so subtly that you only realize it later. And that's precisely when the signs begin, that almost no one understands. The ancients knew that God moved in silent ways, and this awakened an almost sacred attention to every detail of daily life. In the first century, no one imagined that divine guidance needed to be accompanied by spectacle. On the contrary, simplicity was God's preferred stage. The Jews grew up learning to identify patterns of guidance that today go unnoticed in the modern rush. Every gesture, every circumstance, every silence carried meaning. While we expect dramatic signs, they recognized God in the small inflections of life, because they understood that the Creator spoke both through the Word and through the flow of events. Instead of seeking the extraordinary, they observed the ordinary with reverence, believing that God dwelt right there. This contrast reveals why so many today feel spiritually disoriented. Guidance hasn't disappeared. It has simply become too subtle for eyes filled with noise. What if that same logic is still active? What if God continues to guide in ways as simple as before, but our generation, intoxicated by stimuli, has lost the sensitivity to perceive? This question opens the way to discovering forgotten, yet profoundly liberating truths. What we will see here is not mysticism, but an ancient spiritual practice lived by Jesus' generation. Get ready. Many of the signs you've been ignoring may actually be clear directions from God Himself, and today you're going to learn how to recognize them. Signal 1. Silent direction. In the first century, silence was not absence. It was space. Jewish teachers taught that when God did not speak audibly, He was precisely building clarity within. Silence was treated as holy territory, where noises dissipated and the soul could hear what haste muffled. That is why disciples sought quiet places before making important decisions. Silence for them was a compass. The Bible confirms this dynamic when Elijah, exhausted and emotionally broken, finds God not in the strong wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the gentle whisper. This historical detail reveals that God's people have always understood that the Spirit prefers the depth of stillness to the noise of crowds. Jesus also constantly withdrew to solitary places, indicating that silence was part of divine guidance, not a pause from it. In modern daily life, moments of sudden peace carry the same weight. You can be in the midst of chaos, and suddenly a firm conviction arises, as if your mind were emerging from a fog. This is exactly what the ancients called granted clarity. It is not the result of perfect logic, it is the result of presence. Silent guidance requires no explanation, it simply imposes itself. This experience often appears at the most unlikely moments, in the shower, walking alone, looking out the window. It's as if something inside you says, "This is the way," without shouting, without urgency, just firmness. This inner consistency was considered one of the most reliable signs for the Jews of the first century. They didn't doubt it, and perhaps you shouldn't either. Spiritually, recognizing this direction requires humility and sensitivity. God doesn't compete with the noise of the world. He expects you to learn to perceive the voice that manifests itself when everything around you is silent. Silence, far from being abandonment, may be precisely where He is guiding you most accurately. Signal 2. Doors opening and doors closing. The Jews of Jesus' time treated circumstances as spiritual gates. Gates were symbols of decision, protection, and boundary. Whoever decided what passed through had authority over the path. When we speak of doors opening or closing, we are entering directly into one of the oldest concepts of Hebrew providence. Nothing happened by chance. Each door was interpreted as divine movement. This appears countless times in Scripture. Paul tries to go to certain places, but the Spirit prevents him. At other times, doors open unexpectedly. This behavior was so common that the early Christians began to discern God's will by observing precisely these openings and closings. They knew God guides not only by what He allows in, but also by what He blocks. In the first century, this understanding shaped how they viewed opportunities. Did a chance arise? God opened it. Did a plan stall without explanation? God closed it. They didn't insist on breaking down doors that weren't moving. They had discernment and reverence for divine timing. This principle avoided emotional exhaustion and impulsiveness, two problems that, ironically, affect millions today. In modern life, doors that lock are seen as defeat, but for Jesus and his contemporaries, they were protection. Perhaps that job that didn't work out, that relationship that didn't progress, that opportunity that evaporated, none of that is bad luck. It can be care. Similarly, when everything flows naturally, even what seems distant, this fluidity is a sign that God opened the way even before you stepped on it. Emotionally, learning to see closure as divine guidance lifts an enormous weight from your shoulders. God doesn't only guide through yes, he guides through no, with the same loving intention. The door that closed may be exactly the sign you asked for, only it came in a wiser way than you imagined. Sign 3, confirmation by the word. In the 1st century, Jews had the habit of consulting the scriptures daily, not as a ritual, but as a way to refine their hearts. The Torah and the prophets functioned as a spiritual mirror. Those who read sought alignment, not just information. This custom was so common that daily reading became one of the most solid practices for confirming decisions. God's direction was not a matter of opinion. It was verifiable. During Jesus' ministry, we see the same logic. He constantly responded to dilemmas by quoting biblical texts, showing that every choice was rooted in the Word. This was not religious formality, it was spiritual strategy. For the people of that time, no important decision was made without consulting the sacred text. The Word was a compass, a limit, and confirmation. Today, many experience something curious. A verse begins to appear repeatedly, in a sermon, on a page opened at random, in a conversation, in an unexpected video. For the ancients, this would not be coincidence, it would be divine confirmation. Biblical repetition was seen as an underlining from heaven, emphasizing something that God wanted the person to understand. In modern daily life, this pattern manifests itself when you are faced with a choice, and the same text insists on accompanying you. This alignment between decision and scripture was treated as a sure sign. God does not contradict his own word. He uses it to guide. If the direction you intend to follow is in harmony with the text, the path becomes clearer. If it is not, pay attention. Spiritually, this confirmation creates security. When God speaks through his word, he leaves no room for emotional manipulation. He anchors the soul. And when you learn to recognize this pattern, decisions that once seemed hazy begin to gain clarity, not through trial and error, but through revelation. Sign 4, people sent by God. In Jesus' time, people didn't believe in social coincidences. Encounters were interpreted as acts of providence. A messenger arriving at the exact moment wasn't a matter of chance, but a sign that God was weaving stories together. This understanding shaped how they treated everyone they met. No one was seen as random. The Bible is full of such episodes. Nathan confronts David precisely when he needs it most. Philip finds the eunuch in the desert at the exact moment he was seeking understanding. Ananias, out of fear, is sent to pray for Paul and change the trajectory of the entire church. In all these cases, the pattern is the same. God sends people with perfect timing. The 1st century viewed these encounters as living messages. Jewish culture believed that God spoke through ordinary people, and that's why hospitality was so valued. You never knew who was being an instrument of heaven. This mentality made everyday life more sacred and relationships deeper. Nothing was just an encounter. Today, something similar happens when someone appears in your life with a precise word, unexpected advice, unlikely help. It could be a friend, a stranger, even someone you don't particularly like. But the message gets through, and it arrives at the exact moment your heart needs it. In old logic, this wouldn't be chance. It would be direction. Emotionally, learning to recognize when God is using someone transforms how you view your relationships. Some people don't come into your life to stay, they come to guide you. And when you understand this, you begin to honor these encounters more and realize that God often answers through human voices. Sign 5, righteous distress, Lev Tahor. Among the Hebrews, there was a clear difference between anxiety and divine restlessness. Anxiety paralyzed, restlessness moved. The Lev Tahor, or aligned heart, was the idea that God placed a holy burden within a person when something needed to be done. It wasn't fear, it was a mission. This concept was deeply known in the first century. Nehemiah is a classic example. He didn't have an angel, he didn't have a vision, he didn't hear an audible voice. He simply felt a burning weight within him for the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and that weight wouldn't leave him in peace. The Hebrews called this righteous anxiety. When God wanted to move someone, he instilled in them such a strong sense of purpose that it became impossible to ignore. In Jewish practice, this kind of restlessness was seen as direction because it wasn't accompanied by chaos, but rather by a healthy urgency. It wasn't about despair, it was about conviction. This inner drive transformed ordinary people into agents of extraordinary change. This is how God guided prophets, leaders, and even unassuming members of the community. Today, this restlessness arises when something inside you whispers, "You need to do this," even without knowing how, even when you're terrified, even when it seems difficult. The difference is that this feeling doesn't cause loss of control, it produces focus. This is one of the most accurate signs of divine guidance, that which you cannot abandon, despite the discomfort. Spiritually, accepting this restlessness as a guide means understanding that God doesn't always comfort first. He moves first. And when he moves, something within you stirs in a way that isn't anxiety. It's a calling. Sign 6, peace that makes no sense, shalom. In the first century, shalom was not simply emotional tranquility. It was a state of alignment between person, purpose, and God. It was a peace that did not depend on circumstances, but on the divine presence acting within someone. When a Jew said he had shalom about a decision, it meant much more than, "I am at peace." It meant my spirit and the path are in harmony. The Bible shows this when Jesus, about to face the cross, speaks of a peace that the world cannot give. It is paradoxical. He was going to suffer, but he was at peace. This was the essence of shalom, a divine approval perceived internally, even when externally everything seemed contrary. This concept was deeply respected and sought after. In the first century, before making major decisions, people observed whether there was peace or conflict in their hearts. Persistent conflict was a sign that something was out of alignment. Deep peace, even amidst risk, was seen as divine permission. This guided families, leaders, merchants, and even fishermen who needed to decide where to cast their nets. Today, this senseless peace keeps appearing. You might be choosing something difficult, risky, unexpected, and still feel a stubborn serenity within you. This peace isn't rational, it's spiritual. It's when you know the path is arduous, but right. And this silent certainty sustains more than any logical argument. Emotionally, recognizing shalom as divine guidance frees you from the need to convince others, and even yourself. When God approves, peace takes hold first. And when peace takes hold, fear loses its power. Signal 7. Specific measures. The Jews of the first century were masters at perceiving God's microscopic care. They saw divine action not only in great miracles but in the details of daily life. The food that arrived, the help that appeared, the need met at the exact moment. They believed that the God who upheld the heavens also cared for individual steps. This perception made life extraordinary amidst the routine. Jesus reinforces this in Matthew 6 by showing that God clothes the lilies and feeds the birds. Simple details, but full of spiritual meaning. The idea was clear. If God takes care of the small things, he will take care of you in the details as well. This was the basis of Jewish trust in specific providences. They were not seen as luck, but as a divine signature. In practice, specific provisions manifest themselves when something you need, exactly that, arrives at the precise moment. It could be a resource, information, an opportunity, or a person. It's not just anything. It's the right thing. The ancients called this the outstretched hand of God. For them, precision was proof of intervention. Today, this continues to repeat itself. Perhaps you have already experienced this moment. You needed an answer, and it came unexpectedly. You needed help, and it appeared at the last minute. You needed a way out, and something opened up without explanation. These details are not too small for God. They are part of His language. Spiritually, learning to perceive these specific provisions increases your confidence. You begin to understand that God guides not only on the grand paths, but also on the micro. And when He takes care of the macro simply falls into place. Signal 8. Internal transformation. In the first century, character transformation was seen as direct evidence of God's presence. More impressive than a miracle was a genuine change in the human heart. The community observed how someone became less impulsive, wiser, more compassionate, and said, "God is guiding this person." This was the most respected sign of all. Peter is a clear example. From impulsive and unstable, he becomes firm and courageous after encountering the resurrected Christ. Paul, formerly a persecutor, transforms into an apostle. These changes were not attributed to willpower, but to divine guidance acting from within. God guided by transforming first their identity, then their steps. In Jewish culture, this transformation was seen as the most profound sign because it altered behavior, values, and priorities. When someone stopped reacting impulsively and began acting purposefully, the teachers said that the Spirit had begun to guide that life. It was an honor to witness this process. Today, you can recognize this sign when attitudes that once controlled you begin to lose their power. When you find yourself responding differently, desiring healthier things, avoiding toxic patterns, it's not a change that comes from pressure, but from ease. It's almost imperceptible at first, but powerful over time. Spiritually, recognizing this transformation as divine guidance helps you understand that God doesn't just guide you by changing your path. He guides you by changing who you are as you walk. And that is one of the most beautiful works of heaven. The sum of it all reveals a powerful truth. God doesn't guide only in extraordinary moments. He guides in the natural flow of life. The signs He used in the first century remain alive today, silent, profound, constant. Divine guidance doesn't depend on spectacle, but on sensitivity. And when you learn to perceive the subtle movements, your life ceases to be guided by fear and begins to be guided by presence. The signs are not magical, they are historical. They belong to biblical tradition. They were experienced by Jesus, by the apostles, by ordinary people. They apply to modern daily life with the same force as before. You just need to learn to see, hear, and discern. God continues to guide, and perhaps He's been guiding you for a long time. You just lacked understanding. Life changes when you realize you're not walking alone. Peace grows. Anxiety loses its hold. The soul gains direction. And each step begins to make sense within a divine logic that is greater than any internal chaos. This realization is not a spiritual luxury. It's survival. It's purpose. Therefore, if this video helped you to better understand how God is guiding your story, I have a sincere request for you. Follow this channel. Here we explain the Bible with historical depth applied to real life, so that you may live with purpose, clarity, and direction.